Hi, everybody. It's Roger here again. I just wanted to give you an intro to design and give you an idea of the process that you can follow. Um, Brad and Alex also are giving presentations today, which will help you in this process as well. So you've gone through the Post-it note exercise as a class, and you found those clusters. And within those clusters, with the issues, opportunities, and then your design solutions, you zoomed in and you found a site you wanted to design. So let's look at the screen here today. You can see that I've zoomed in and chosen a site that I wanted to design on. So I go to Google Earth or Google Maps, I take the labels off, and I take a screenshot. And I use that as my base map. And then you guys are going to want to draw on top of or to the side your design on this base map. So my site is a pretty big site. So you certainly don't have to have it this big, but I chose a big one just to show you a lot of elements and relationships. One main big thing to pay attention to is scale. So you see houses present on this photo. Draw houses that are somewhat that size. Keep that in mind. So for starters, gosh, how do we start this? Well, we want to look at what we know. And if you think back to your previous assignments, we kind of did the same thing. So we've mapped a lot of things. So let's start with what we know. What's easiest? We want to create a structure. So we'll trace our roads. Our roads are important. It's how everything is connected, and it's really easy to start with. We know it, we're confident with this. All right, then what's next? Well, environmental features, right? That's the whole point of this. So let's trace or draw some of our environmental features. So I traced the creek, and then I kind of outlined some flood areas and natural areas that I felt were important. So I've got kind of a structure down here with what I know and what I want to deal with. I have the important things down. So now, once I have that down, I can start thinking for myself and I can start adding new elements. I think we talked to you about keeping things at a human scale. When everything's a Walmart and a Kmart, we get overwhelmed and things are large and it's hard to meet neighbors, it's hard to have community. So if you keep it at a human scale, you can add new streets. So we took that big, vacant, probably super fun site and we chopped it up. And now we can start making it more of a neighborhood. So once we have our new block structure down, our new streets, what else do we need? Well, gosh, people need parks. So let's add a park. Look what I did. I connected the major street down to environmentally sensitive land, and it runs through the new block structure / neighborhood. Now, once we have that structure down, we can start relating buildings to our block structure and to our parks and to our environmentally sensitive areas. So orange, mixed use, out along the big major streets, right? You can put commercial down on the ground floor and then office and residential upstairs. Also, multifamily in brown, very important to get density so we have enough people to utilize the shops and the mixed use. And then, maybe some yellow single family or duplex housing in there as well. All relates to the street, relates to each other, and those people have access through our linear park to the open areas. So let's make those open areas floodable parks. They're usable and they can also flood. It helps people's lifestyle and helps the environment. And we can go a step further and add some wetlands. The whole point is to improve the environment. So let's add some wetlands to filter some of that dirty water in Cypress Creek. And then, gosh, we need transportation. We need to tie all this together. How about let's add a greenway? And this greenway can not only connect neighbors and provide greater access to the park and to the environmentally sensitive area, but it promotes non-motorized transportation. It helps folks who don't have a lot of money. You can have an easier way of walking places. It provides recreation and health as well. And it connects our site down to the Memphis 3.0 neighborhood anchor where the city might be investing money. Lastly, you want to add some labels. So you can see here kind of the process. Start with what you know, then add some structure in new streets on your own accord, and then maybe a park or two, and you can then have something to react against to add your buildings and have reasoning behind where you put the types of land use and buildings. Again, this doesn't have to be this big. You can do something a quarter this size, just as long as you're showing relationships as I modeled in this exercise in front of you now. Good luck. Start with the roads and the environmental elements. Start small and just block in your design as I did here. You'll do well. Thanks.
Hey everybody, Alex here. I just want to talk to you for a little bit about some urban design principles that we'd like for you to keep in mind when you're laying out your site. These are just some things that may help you make the area a little bit more pedestrian friendly and ultimately more environmentally friendly. So the first things we've got listed here is setbacks. Simply put, setbacks are just how far a building is set back from the road. So buildings that are close to the road, ultimately they slow traffic. If you've ever been driving on like a busy road like Germantown Parkway or Highway 64 that has these big parking lots that separate the buildings by hundreds of feet, people are usually flying down those roads. But then once you get further into the city and you're driving down Madison Avenue or Cooper, where these buildings are set right up close to the road, it slows traffic down because people are more observant of the people that are around them, and it creates a sense of closeness right there so that people just tend to not drive as fast. It also increases the walkability of a neighborhood. When you have buildings this close to the road, you constantly have people that are watching and are able to see if people are driving bad or if crime's going to occur somewhere. It just gives people an overall feeling of safety, therefore making them more likely to walk around. And so the second thing we want to look at is parking. So as you can see in these images here, the buildings are all set right up next to the road and they've got parking in the rear. Like I was saying before, if you've ever seen like a Walmart or a Target parking lot, it's usually rows and rows of parking out in front of a building, and then the building is set way far back in the back. It's not a very inviting feeling, and what we're trying to create here is an environment that if you're riding a bike, if you're driving a car, if you're walking, that everybody has access to these places. So this will just emphasize people being able to get into these businesses any way that they can, not just by driving a car and having to park in a parking lot and then wait for a long time at a light before you can finally get out onto a main road again. Anybody can access these easily. What we've seen in the past and what's starting to happen more is that when these parking lots are pushed to the back like this, you're providing priority spaces for electric and alternative transportation. It's just another incentive for people to make more environmentally friendly choices. But when you have parking lots like this, you tend to only have enough spaces for the amount of people that you're going to have there. Unless it's Black Friday shopping or something, you're almost never going to see a Walmart parking lot that's full all the way. So they've sized that parking lot for the most intensive day of the year, but for 99% of the time, that parking lot's really not ever getting used. If you're able to shrink it down and just have parking for the amount of people that you're going to have most of the time, you're able to decrease that footprint and you're able to offer more amenities actually around your site. You could add benches and things like that in that space that you wouldn't normally have if you had a giant parking lot right there. And it increases bikeability by closing areas to vehicle traffic, but providing bike lanes. Through this, the buildings would already be set up close to the road, but then providing bike lanes across there is just another way to include everybody that's going to be moving around in this area, while not shutting them off. The next thing we're going to look at is prioritizing sidewalks. So there's a lot of different things you can do with sidewalks, but what we're trying to do here is make them less of just a path that people are walking on and more of a place where things can actually take place. So in these images, you can see that they've got benches there. There's nice vegetation planted in the middle. This one on the left has got a nice meandering walkway with plenty of room so that if there were restaurants out here, you could have seating out front. If people wanted to congregate outside, you wouldn't necessarily have to be going to any one of these businesses, but that's just a place where people won't be afraid to be walking on this sidewalk for fear of crazy traffic going on right next to them, or walking their dog or pushing their baby in a stroller. The wider the sidewalk, the more likely people are to actually use them because of that feeling of safety right there. And the last thing we want to look at is streets. So you can see from these examples, there's been a lot of creative things done here. And really our ultimate goal is to slow down traffic. Slower traffic just equals less accidents, and people feel more safe walking next to the road that way. And when you have people who are not flying down the street, you tend to have more people congregating outside, and you're able to foster more of a community appeal to an area instead of it just being you go in, you go out, you go back home. In places like this, people are more likely to stay out and interact with their community instead of just, like I said, going in the building and then going back home. So you could add specialized speed zones that give priority to citizens. So if you have flashing lights that are saying, during these hours, the speed limit is 25 miles an hour, it gives people a sense of safety. And if they do have to cross the street and it's a busy area, you can't always control how busy an area is going to be, but you can control how much traffic's going to move through there and how fast that traffic is going to move. And if people feel like it's safe to cross the street, you're just creating more and more interconnectivity between an area. You can also see some creative bike lanes that are in some of these areas. I mean, the bike lane in this one to the right is taking up almost as much space as the actual the motor vehicle lanes are, which is kind of what we're going for here. You want people to have options. You want to feel like you can ride your bike in this area, not just that, oh, if I'm riding in this bike lane, I might get run off the road. You want to give people a sense of safety, and that's really one of the biggest things that we're looking at here. You can also create pedestrian-only corridors. So if you look down in this picture in the bottom left, you see how the roads kind of meander around these areas that are painted on the sidewalk there. This is to keep people from flying from one point to the other, but it's also creating a space out front that people can enjoy, and kids can play right here and things like that and not feel like that they're going to get run over by a car, because people understand that this area is designed so that cars aren't flying through here. So if you have any questions or anything about this stuff, just shoot them our way. Hopefully these ideas can kind of spur what you're thinking for these areas and give you some creative solutions. I know that it's not an easy site to work with, but hopefully with what we've shown you here, you can get a good start on things. Thanks, guys.
Hello again, everyone. Brad here, and today I will be discussing the land use exercise that we did a class or two ago. So I'm really excited to share what me, Roger, and the rest of the team saw in your land use maps. So overall, we were all really shocked by how different and well planned these exercises turned out to be. One thing about the exercise is that there's no quote unquote right answers. So sure, there are like better answers, and we'll discuss those in a bit. Or maybe not even better answers, but just things to keep in mind. But it's not like there's like land that is inherently zoned one way. So keep that in mind as I review these 6 maps that we see here. I picked these in particular because they represented a good range of the like land use patterns that we saw throughout your land use maps. But just because I picked these doesn't mean like these are the best ones. These were just the ones that I thought represented the classes pretty well. So getting started, do y'all notice a kind of a big difference between the top 3 maps and the bottom 3? As you can see, the bottom 3 have much bigger zones, quote unquote. Each zone covers a wide area of land and are not mixed in among each other, which is the complete opposite of the top 3 maps. These maps show different zones, the top three ones. They show different zones intermingled amongst each other with smaller areas of land. And I'll get into those in a minute, but let's discuss the bottom three a little bit more. So like I said, these maps are more traditionally zoned. In the left and middle maps, we see that the industrial zone tends to be on the outside perimeters of the site, which is great since industrial uses do not need to be near a large population of people that we would find typically in housing or commercial zones. However, the left map also puts the industrial zone right near Cypress Creek, and this might not be the best choice since many industrial uses could have runoff and waste that could end up in the creek, either by negligent dumping, uh, the contaminants or waste seeping into the soil, or rain runoff. So this issue could be solved by moving the industrial zone farther away from the creek. Another aspect of each of the three bottom maps seem to be the use of open space as buffers between other zones. So buffers can visually and physically help the flow of a city by aiding the transition from one zone to another. And so open space also separates housing commercial uses in the left and middle maps, which in one sense could be bad since it offers a little less connectivity for people to access the commercial uses from their houses. But it could be good in that it makes that transition from one zone to another. And with it being open space, it could be, maybe turned into a park. And that park could act as a middle ground between the housing and commercial uses so that people could kind of congregate there if they were going in between the two zones. So I guess it all just kind of depends on what you want and what the city wants. The right map even uses open space as a buffer between other zones and the creek. And that's so smart because this extra space could slow down the rain runoff, which could contain, undesirable elements, plus trash from entering the creek. It would prevent those things from entering the creek, or at least do it at a slower pace because there's grass or just open areas. And with that open space, we could even potentially put like a bioswale or a rain garden to further help mitigate the waste and pollution from entering the creek. And if anything, just do it at a slower rate. So now let's look at the maps on top. In contrast to the bottom three, the top maps have much smaller land areas for their zones, with housing, commercial, and open space all kind of intertwined. However, these seem not to be just randomly placed. In the right map, we see a hub of commercial in the middle of housing, which is towards the top of the site. And this is a great choice since a centrally located commercial area provides relatively equal access to everyone and acts as almost like a town center. All of the top maps also have small to medium-sized open space zones. The open spaces can provide, again, visual breaks or transitions between buildings and uses, and can also be turned into, or potentially be turned into pocket parks with housing surrounding them. The left map does a fair job of keeping the land around the creek free of industrial uses, but agricultural uses can also have similar problems for the creek, or could have similar problems, since pesticides and chemicals used in farming could contaminate the soil. And while there are differences and similarities between all 6 maps, everyone's maps, including everyone that's not included on that slide, is missing one important thing, and that's mixed use. So just a quick recap, mixed-use zoning permits a complementary mix of residential, commercial, and or industrial uses in a single district. And so some benefits of mixed-use zoning include they minimize the need for car ownership by either walking, biking, or using public transit to get around. They support local businesses by increasing foot traffic. They reduce housing and transportation costs by providing a range of housing options and Also, alternatives to automobile travel, like I said earlier, so healthier options like biking and walking. They reduce vehicle miles traveled, which depend on fossil fuels and greenhouse gas emissions, and they emit greenhouse gas emissions. They reduce the cost of delivering public services like sewers and roads, and they also provide a compact development pattern that helps preserve open space and natural resources that can be found elsewhere in the community or region. And so, to see how mixed use might change our maps, I added some orange zones to the top, middle, and the bottom left and right maps. When thinking of mixed use, location is key because one of the goals is to serve as many uses and people as possible. In the maps I edited, you can see I put orange in places that were either centrally located or in places where there were no commercial uses close by. So by doing this, I figured more people would have access to housing, like condos and apartments, restaurants, and other services that mixed use provides. And so, yeah, overall, that's all I have for you. But we were all very impressed with how well y'all did, and where some of the things that y'all thought of. A lot more that we could discuss, but unfortunately, we were a little out of time. But again, we were all really impressed by your land use exercises, and from what we could see, there was intent behind where you put things. Y'all thought it out. Y'all did a really great job at considering where things should be placed. So props to you. And yeah, great job, Crosstown, and keep planning.